She said I wasn't ambitious enough for her new lifestyle, so I quietly accepted a job offer in Philadelphia and moved out without telling her. 3 years of what I thought was building something real with Leah came to an abrupt end when her promotion changed everything about who she was, and I learned that love conditional on career advancement isn't really love at all. I'm Mason, 28, a freight logistics manager in Columbus, Ohio, and I thought I had my life figured out pretty well before everything went sideways. I lived in a renovated duplex in German Village that I'd been fixing up for the past 5 years, room by room, turning what was once a neglected rental property into something I was genuinely proud to call home. My 2019 Silverado was paid off and ran like a dream. I had a solid emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses, and I'd built up enough equity in my property to consider it a real investment rather than just a place to sleep. Nothing flashy or Instagram-worthy, but solid and dependable, which used to matter to the woman I loved before she decided that stability was somehow inadequate compared to the corporate ladder she suddenly needed to climb. Leah and I met at a company mixer in early 2021 when she was working as a biotech equipment sales representative for a mid-sized firm and I was managing supply chain logistics for a distribution company that handled everything from automotive parts to medical supplies across the Midwest. She was smart, genuinely driven in a way that impressed me, and had this infectious enthusiasm when she talked about her work with laboratory equipment and research facilities that made even the most technical details sound fascinating. What I appreciated most about her during those early months was how grounded she seemed despite earning about $15,000 more than I did annually. She always insisted we split dinner checks down the middle, never made condescending comments about my blue-collar logistics work, and genuinely seemed to enjoy our quiet weekends when we'd work on renovation projects in my duplex together or explore Columbus's surprisingly diverse food scene without worrying about being seen at the right places by the right people. For the first 2.5 years, we functioned as genuine partners who respected each other's careers and contributions equally, with her higher salary naturally balanced by my practical skills around the house, my knowledge of the city from growing up here, and the substantial equity I was steadily building in my property through sweat and careful investment. Everything felt natural and sustainable, like we were building towards something permanent and meaningful, until her company offered her a promotion to regional sales director that came with a luxury company car, a salary boost that nearly doubled her income overnight, and a territory that stretched across Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, requiring constant travel to high-end medical conferences and corporate networking events that seemed designed to separate the successful from the merely adequate. I was genuinely proud of her achievement when she first got the news and excited about what this promotion meant for our future together, naively assuming we'd use her increased income to maybe upgrade to a larger house in a better neighborhood or finally take that European vacation we'd been talking about for months but never quite had the budget to justify. Instead, Leah's new role immediately introduced her to a circle of affluent colleagues and clients who viewed my freight logistics work with the kind of thinly veiled disdain I'd never experienced before in my life, treating me like invisible background noise whenever they attended the corporate cocktail parties and networking dinners she was suddenly required to host at upscale venues around the city. Her new regional manager, a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s who drove a Tesla and lived in New Albany, would make subtle comments during these gatherings about how successful women needed partners who could match their ambition and complement their professional image, while her female colleagues would casually discuss their husbands' careers in finance, law, and consulting, with the clear implication that dating someone who coordinated shipping routes and managed warehouse operations was somehow settling for less than what an educated, accomplished woman truly deserved. I started noticing how Leah would deflect direct questions about my work at these events, describing my job in deliberately vague terms or quickly steering conversations towards safer topics like travel destinations or restaurant recommendations, and I began to understand with growing clarity that my career had transformed overnight from something she respected into something she was actively embarrassed to explain to her new professional circle. Within 3 months of her promotion, Leah had become someone I barely recognized, obsessed with status symbols and corporate networking culture in ways that made our quiet evenings together feel like interruptions in her real life rather than the foundation we'd been building together. Her new circle of colleagues became her primary social focus, especially Brianna, a sharp-tongued district manager who was married to a hedge fund analyst and never missed an opportunity to mention their vacation home in the Outer Banks or the private school tuition they were already planning for children they didn't even have yet. Then there was Chad, an arrogant corporate trainer from Cincinnati who drove a BMW and felt compelled to lecture anyone within earshot about investment portfolios, cryptocurrency strategies, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who shared your commitment to financial growth and professional excellence. I watched Leah transform from someone who used to laugh at pretentious displays of wealth into someone who hung on every word when Chad explained why successful people needed to be strategic about their social circles and romantic relationships, nodding along as he outlined the benefits of dating within your own economic bracket to avoid the complications that arose when couples had mismatched career trajectories and income potential. The changes started subtly with Leah making offhand comments about my limited career prospects whenever we discussed future plans, suggesting that maybe I should consider transitioning into supply chain consulting or pursuing an MBA to expand my professional horizons beyond the warehouse and transportation sector that she increasingly described as a dead-end field with no real growth opportunities. Our weekend routines shifted dramatically as she began attending business brunches, networking mixers, and professional development seminars that somehow always excluded me, either because they were invitation-only events for industry professionals or because Leah thought I'd find the conversation topics boring and above my comprehension level. She started pushing for dinner reservations at expensive restaurants that required advanced planning and dress codes, places where the appetizers cost more than I usually spent on an entire meal, and when I suggested more reasonable alternatives that fit our original budget, she'd sigh with visible disappointment and make comments about how we couldn't keep living like college students forever if we wanted to build something meaningful together. The most telling change was how Leah interacted with my friends and family during the rare occasions when our social worlds still overlapped, adopting a polite but distant demeanor that made everyone uncomfortable and clearly conveyed that she considered these gatherings beneath her new station in life. Her own parents, who had always treated me with warmth and genuine affection, began asking pointed questions about my 5-year plan and whether I'd ever considered advancing beyond my current position, with her mother making increasingly frequent comments about how Leah deserved someone who could match her ambition and provide the lifestyle her education and hard work had earned her. Every conversation about our relationship's future became an implicit evaluation of whether I was holding Leah back from reaching her full potential, and I started to feel like I was constantly auditioning for a role in her life rather than being accepted as an equal partner in building something together that we both valued and wanted to protect. The engagement planning process became a complete nightmare that revealed just how far Leah had drifted from the practical, grounded person I'd fallen in love with, as she became obsessed with creating a wedding that would serve as a showcase for her new professional status rather than a celebration of our relationship. When we first started discussing marriage seriously, I'd imagined something intimate and meaningful, maybe at the beautiful botanical garden in Columbus or one of the historic venues downtown, with our families and closest friends sharing a day that reflected who we actually were as a couple rather than who Leah thought we needed to appear to be for her corporate network. Instead, Leah immediately began researching destination wedding venues in Napa Valley, insisting that we needed a location that would be worthy of the professional photographs she wanted to use for her LinkedIn profile and corporate bio, with premium vendors who specialized in luxury events that her colleagues would find impressive and Instagram-worthy. The venues she favored started at $40,000 just for the basic package, not including travel costs for our families, accommodation expenses, or the upgraded catering and floral arrangements that she considered essential for creating the sophisticated atmosphere she envisioned for what she described as the most important networking event of her career. Every time I suggested more reasonable local options that our families could actually afford to attend, Leah would dismiss my ideas as embarrassing or not befitting her professional image, explaining that her colleagues expected a certain level of sophistication from someone in her position and that a modest celebration would send the wrong message about our financial stability and future prospects. Her mother became her primary ally in this campaign for extravagance, showing up to our planning meetings with detailed spreadsheets comparing luxury venues, photographers who specialized in corporate executive weddings, and catering companies that could provide the kind of elevated dining experience that would make the right impression on her daughter's professional contacts who would be attending. The guilt-tripping became relentless, with both women treating my financial reality as a personal inadequacy rather than a practical constraint that responsible adults needed to acknowledge and work within when making major decisions about shared expenses and family obligations. Every conversation about the wedding became a power struggle where my concerns about budget and practicality were framed as evidence that I didn't truly value our relationship or understand what Leah deserved after all her hard work and professional achievements, while her increasingly expensive demands were presented as completely reasonable expectations that any man who truly loved his fiancée would find a way to meet regardless of his current income level or financial obligations. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in March while I was reviewing shipping manifests and trying to pretend I wasn't questioning every major decision I'd made in the past year, when a recruiter from Philadelphia reached out about a senior logistics coordinator position with a major shipping corporation that I'd never even heard of but apparently had an outstanding reputation in the industry. The position offered a 40% salary increase over my current income, full relocation assistance including moving expenses and temporary housing, and the kind of growth opportunities that I'd been quietly craving but hadn't dared to hope were actually available to someone with my background and experience level. When the recruiter described the company culture and advancement potential, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, genuine excitement about my professional future and a sense that someone actually valued the skills and expertise I'd been developing throughout my career in logistics management. The initial phone interview went better than I'd dared to hope, leading to a formal video conference with the hiring manager and eventually an invitation to visit Philadelphia for an in-person interview that would include meeting the entire team and touring their facilities to get a real sense of whether this opportunity was the right fit for both parties. I told Leah I was taking a long weekend to visit my college roommate in Philadelphia, a small lie that felt necessary given how dismissive she'd become about my career prospects and her tendency to undermine any professional confidence I tried to maintain in the face of her constant suggestions that I needed to completely reinvent myself to be worthy of our relationship. The trip to Philadelphia was a revelation that opened my eyes to possibilities I hadn't even known existed, both professionally and personally, as I spent 3 days exploring a city that felt vibrant and welcoming in ways that made me realize how stagnant my life had become in Columbus under the weight of Leah's disapproval and social climbing ambitions. The interview process was comprehensive and challenging, covering everything from supply chain optimization to crisis management protocols. And by the end of the second day I knew this was exactly the kind of role I'd been working toward without even realizing it, with colleagues who respected my experience and a company culture that valued practical problem-solving over corporate politics and networking theater. When they offered me the position on the spot with a start date in early June, I accepted immediately and spent the rest of my visits secretly apartment hunting in neighborhoods that combined reasonable rent with easy access to both downtown and the shipping facilities where I'd be working, feeling more optimistic about my future than I had in over a year. I returned to Columbus with a signed employment contract, a list of potential apartments, and a moving company already scheduled for the first week of June, all while Leah remained completely oblivious to the fact that I was planning to rebuild my entire life in a different state without her constant judgment and manipulation affecting my daily sense of self-worth and professional confidence. The timing of Leah's prenuptial agreement announcement was so perfectly ironic that I almost laughed out loud when she brought it up during our weekly dinner at Morton's Steakhouse, the expensive downtown restaurant that had become our regular spot ever since she decided that my previous favorite places were too casual for someone in her professional position. We were halfway through our appetizers when she launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech about the importance of modern couples being financially strategic and protecting their individual assets, explaining that her financial advisor had recommended a comprehensive prenuptial agreement that would keep all property, investments, and income completely separate throughout our marriage to avoid any potential complications if our circumstances changed in the future. She spoke about the prenup with the same corporate confidence she used during her sales presentations, outlining the benefits of maintaining separate bank accounts, retirement funds, and investment portfolios while splitting household expenses according to our respective income levels rather than treating marriage as a complete financial merger that could create unnecessary complications or resentment down the road. The irony was absolutely delicious, considering that I'd be leaving for Philadelphia in exactly 8 weeks with substantial equity from selling my duplex and a new salary that would actually exceed her current income level by several $1,000s annually, making her protective financial measures completely irrelevant since I had no intention of ever sharing a bank account or household expenses with someone who viewed our relationship as a business arrangement requiring legal safeguards. I nodded enthusiastically as she explained how separate finances would allow us both to maintain our independence and pursue our individual career goals without feeling constrained by a partner's financial limitations or different priorities. Internally grinning as she congratulated herself for being mature and forward-thinking about protecting the assets she'd worked so hard to accumulate through her recent promotion and salary increase. The conversation became even more entertaining when she started discussing the specific terms she wanted included in the prenup, such as provisions for keeping her company car, investment accounts, and any future bonuses completely separate from marital property, while also ensuring that household expenses would be split proportionally based on our respective incomes rather than equally regardless of our different earning potential. She seemed genuinely pleased with herself for approaching marriage like a business partnership with clearly defined roles and responsibilities, explaining that this kind of strategic thinking was exactly what separated successful couples from those who let emotions and romantic idealism cloud their judgment about practical financial realities that needed to be addressed before they became sources of conflict or resentment. When she asked if I had any concerns about signing a comprehensive prenuptial agreement that would essentially function as a detailed financial contract governing every aspect of our shared expenses and individual asset protection, I enthusiastically agreed that separate finances made perfect sense for modern couples who valued independence and wanted to avoid the complications that arose when people with different income levels tried to merge their financial lives completely. The best part was watching her relief and satisfaction as I praised her for being so practical and mature about protecting her financial interests, completely unaware that her careful planning was protecting assets I'd never want to touch and income I'd never need to rely on since I'd be building my own financial security in Philadelphia with people who actually respected my professional capabilities and personal worth. The moment of revelation came 3 weeks later during what I'd planned as our final dinner together, though Leah had no idea she was about to discover that everything she thought she knew about our future was completely wrong and that her careful financial planning had been protecting her from a relationship that was already over in my mind. I chose the same upscale steakhouse where she'd outlined her prenuptial requirements, partly for the irony and partly because I wanted our conversation to take place somewhere public enough that she couldn't create the kind of dramatic scene she'd probably want to make once she realized that her status-obsessed lifestyle had cost her the one person who genuinely loved her before she became someone else entirely. We were discussing the final details of the wedding timeline when I calmly announced that I'd accepted a senior logistics coordinator position in Philadelphia and would be relocating permanently in 2 weeks, with no intention of maintaining a long-distance relationship or including her in my plans for building a new life in a different city. The look of complete shock on her face was almost worth the months of condescension and manipulation I'd endured while she transformed from someone I respected into someone who viewed our relationship as a social liability that needed to be managed rather than a partnership between equals who supported each other's goals and dreams. When she finally recovered enough to ask if I would have invited her to come with me if she'd been more supportive of my career, I gave her the honest answer she deserved, that I wouldn't have included her in my Philadelphia plans regardless of how she'd behaved recently, because I'd realized that I didn't want to marry someone who required a prenuptial agreement to protect herself from the financial risks of being legally connected to me. Her reaction progressed through predictable stages, starting with disbelief that I could make such a major life decision without consulting her, then escalating to anger when she realized that I'd been planning my escape for weeks while letting her continue with wedding preparations that would never happen, and finally culminating in desperate attempts at manipulation when she understood that her corporate networking success had cost her the stable, loving relationship she'd taken for granted. While climbing her professional ladder, The conversation became increasingly hostile as she accused me of being vindictive and immature for abandoning our relationship over minor disagreements about wedding expenses and social expectations, completely failing to understand that her treatment of me had revealed fundamental incompatibilities that no amount of compromise or communication could resolve. When she finally called me mediocre and stormed out of the restaurant after throwing her engagement ring on the table, I felt nothing but relief that I'd never have to pretend to be grateful for her conditional affection or apologize for having a career she found embarrassing compared to her new social circle's standards of professional success. The aftermath was predictably dramatic, with her family and friends attempting to intervene through phone calls and text messages that painted me as the villain in a story where their beloved daughter and friend was the innocent victim of my sudden and inexplicable decision to prioritize my own happiness over her needs and expectations. Her mother showed up at my duplex 3 days before my moving truck arrived, offering to help Leah relocate to Philadelphia if I'd reconsider my decision to end our engagement. But I explained that geography wasn't the real problem and that her daughter needed to find someone who wanted the same kind of lifestyle and relationship dynamic that made her feel secure and successful. Even Brianna and Chad reached out through mutual acquaintances, expressing their shock that I'd chosen to walk away from such an accomplished and attractive woman who'd offered me opportunities for social and professional advancement that someone in my position should have appreciated rather than rejected out of wounded pride or unrealistic expectations about partnership equality. Philadelphia welcomed me with open arms, and the kind of professional respect I'd forgotten was possible after months of being treated like a liability instead of an asset, as I settled into a modern apartment in Northern Liberties with exposed brick walls and enough space for a proper home office where I could work remotely when needed. The moving process went smoothly thanks to the relocation package my new company provided, and within 2 weeks I felt more at home in my new city than I had in Columbus during the final months of my relationship with Leah, when every conversation felt like a performance evaluation where I consistently failed to meet her evolving standards for professional success and social acceptability. My new position exceeded every expectation I'd had when I first applied, with colleagues who valued practical experience over corporate networking theater and a management team that recognized my contributions through increased responsibilities and genuine opportunities for advancement rather than empty promises about future potential. The work itself was challenging and engaging in ways that reminded me why I'd chosen logistics management in the first place, coordinating complex shipping operations across multiple time zones while solving problems that required both analytical thinking and creative problem-solving skills that my previous company had never fully utilized or appreciated. Philadelphia's energy was infectious and inspiring, with historic neighborhoods that offered weekend exploration opportunities, an incredible food scene that ranged from authentic cheesesteaks to world-class fine dining, and farmers markets where I could browse locally grown produce without worrying about whether my shopping choices reflected poorly on someone else's professional image or social media presence. After 4 months, I'd established a satisfying routine that included morning runs along the Schuylkill River, exploring different neighborhoods each weekend to learn more about my new city's history and culture, and dating casually without the pressure of meeting anyone's predetermined criteria for career advancement potential or social status compatibility. The contrast with my previous life became even clearer when I started meeting people who appreciated straightforward conversation and genuine interests rather than viewing every social interaction as an opportunity for professional networking or status validation, reminding me what healthy relationships actually looked like when both people contributed equally and respected each other's individual worth. Through mutual friends back in Columbus, I learned that Leah had quickly moved on to dating a pharmaceutical executive she'd met through her professional network, a development that confirmed my decision to prioritize my own happiness over trying to transform myself into someone she could proudly display at corporate events and networking functions. The fact that she'd found someone who apparently met her criteria for financial success and professional prestige within months of our breakup proved that our relationship had been more about convenience and social positioning than genuine emotional connection or shared values about building a meaningful life together. Her rapid transition to someone who could provide the lifestyle and status she craved validated my belief that I'd made the right choice in walking away from a relationship where love was conditional on meeting external standards rather than being accepted for who I actually was and what I had to offer as a partner and individual. 6 months into my new life, I felt grateful for the painful lesson Leah had taught me about the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can provide for them, and I looked forward to eventually finding someone who would appreciate the stability, loyalty, and genuine affection I'd wasted on someone who valued corporate networking opportunities more than emotional intimacy and mutual respect.